let's get started with prayer, and then we'll get into it. Lord, we just want to say, as always, thank you for everything that you've given to us, Lord. Thank you for everything you do for us. Lord, it is almost even difficult to talk about how you do things for us because we feel like so often that we should be doing things for you, but Lord, you call us to faith because you've done the things, and that just means that we need to trust you for those things, and you continue to do the things, Lord, that need to be done. And so, Lord, we pray that you would help us to have faith in you and trust you for the things that you want to do through us. As we look at this topic, Lord, I pray that you would just give us clarity and help us to see just how incredible it is that you have not only put us into this world, not only created the world, Lord, but you've also put us into it, and you've also given us the ability to see and observe its beauty and its complexity and all these things, Lord. Everything that you've given to us, Lord, even the trials are a gift. And so we thank you for them. We pray these things in your name. Amen. So let me get my stuff here. There we go. Okay. So we're going through just the basic topic of creation versus evolution. And I think I'm going to probably spend a couple more weeks on this just because I think it's a valuable topic. What I wanted to do is kind of provide arguments in case you guys are ever in those debates and wanted something to say, you know. And I know this just from having conversations with you guys that most of you already have thought this through a lot and have a lot of things to say already, and that's awesome. But there were a couple of things that have stood out to me over time to just say that this is not just an important topic to be able to defend your faith and things like that, but it's an important topic because when you give yourself over to a godless evolutionary concept, then what happens is it sets you up for a perspective of the world, and it has set up our culture for a perspective of the world that has just drawn culture downward, and we can see that in huge ways. And that's really how we started out this whole conversation, is just looking at how has this idea affected the world. Now, I also want to clarify before I go on. I take a very literal view of Genesis. I take a day, each day is a day idea, a view of it. But with, by the way, a little bit of give in the first day. I think there's something there, and I can get into that later. But there's a view that's out there right now that God used evolution for his process of creation. And I want to say that I believe that carries a lot less cultural problems than just a straight evolutionary view. Because people that take that view, how do I say this? They believe that evolution is how the world came to be, but that God's behind it. That's a view of some people that are very close to me. And basically, I don't think that is as damaging as just a complete godless view. Because the major problems in this world have come from, major problems have come from not believing that there's a God at all. And so not seeing creation as proof of God. And so that's really how we started this whole conversation, is just looking at the cultural effect of evolution. And I'll reiterate simply by saying what it did was it removed God. That's rather obvious, right? But then when people were trying to understand, I guess you could say, how this world would operate without God, basically the idea was that they could see that there's no necessity for morals, I guess, because if there's no God, then you don't have anybody to answer to, you know.
That's true.
So it creates this what we now call postmodern. It creates a postmodern view of complete absence of morality. As a reaction to that, it's funny because this is, I would say, the next major sort of philosophical move or ethos move in the world, and but a few people are really aware that it ever took place. But the next step after postmodernism was what you call collectivism. And what that is if we sort of choose as a culture, if we sort of choose our morality, then we can go with whatever we choose. And so there's a sense of morality in it. There's a sense of, hey, as a culture, we've chosen these certain things that we appreciate or don't like. And so all of culture can operate like that, and we'll be okay because we've all chosen into that. And
peer pressure.
yeah, I mean,
Just like,
essentially, yeah.
like whatever group of peers you're with, just go along with them, and then that means you're doing the right thing.
It's
Right.
like writing your own Bible, though.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Right. Well, I mean, think about how we vote in America today, right? I like the idea of voting. By the way, I'm not trying to disparage the idea of voting, but what people used to do is they used to vote their morality. In other words, they believed something was right because there's a God, and then they voted according to that morality. And some people might have leaned a little bit more toward freedom. Some people might have leaned a little bit more toward I guess, standardized ethics. But whatever the case is, oh yeah, a little cha-cha going on. I always want to groove when the music happens, so bear with me if I do. So let me see, where was I? What happens with I guess you could say a culturally agreed upon morality, is that if you all sort of choose a morality all at once, then what happens is the standards by which you choose that, if they don't agree with God, then you just kind of end up going with your own morality. And I think that's what people did in America, is that instead of coming from a belief in God and the morality He's handed out, what we have done is we've sort of become God in our own minds, and we've sort of begun to vote our morality in. And so now we're sort of the moral arbiters rather than God. And you can see how that's gone. We've had several conversations about this in the church over the last couple of months, but we can see this whole gender bending idea as a part of this scenario, where God had solid, clear rules about this. What we've done is we've come up with our own views of how this stuff works, and our basically our rule is something like, like our highest standard is something like maybe acceptance. That's our highest standard. But what has happened is that we have thrown away any kind of safeguard to what we accept. And so right now, somebody was just showing me this on the flag. You know how we have like the rainbow flag? There is now a series of stripes that refer to, I hate to say it, but pedophilic love. That's the new thing.
What's
Children. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's terrible.
And so, I mean, to me, it's like once you've taken away the boundaries to acceptance and how God has guided that acceptance, now you see like this complete openness, complete acceptance, which to a person who values acceptance at the highest level, the harder it is to accept something, the better it sort of becomes, right? Because hey, that's going to take aggressive acceptance. We're going to have to really get rid of all of our boundaries, right? And so what happens is culturally we begin to accept more aggressively the things that should not be accepted, because acceptance is the highest thing. So there's real danger in this, but that's where we've gone.
It's under the guise of everybody's okay, I'm okay, you're okay kind of thing.
Yeah, and I mean, I think in some way it really begins with good intention. I really want to clarify that. I think a lot of people really approach this with good intention. And a lot of it can be kind of summed up in this idea that God loves sinners, right? There's a lot of acceptance in that. Should be a lot of acceptance. But then there's a qualification that a lot of Christians will use. It's not necessarily a verse of the Bible, but it's a qualification of God loves sinners, but he hates the sin, right? Because he knows that sin is damaging to the sinner. So he wants to deliver the sinner from the sin. It doesn't mean, his love for the sinner doesn't include a love for the sin. And so I think we've sort of cast that aside because we don't believe in a God at all. So now we're accepting the person and the sin, and that's becoming extremely dangerous, I think. So we've seen this kind of development over time, and I think right now we're sort of living at the very edge of it getting as dark as it can get. You know, as far as I'm concerned, I believe it's about to get there. The other thing that we saw was just a basic effect of what is it called? Evolution, in terms of how it affected, I guess you could say, a belief in the progress of racism. And at first, Darwin's, I think his book was, I don't remember the title of it right now. Actually, maybe I have it. It wasn't just Origin of the Species. There it is. The origin of the species by means of natural selection, comma, this is all the title, or the preservation of favored races in the struggle for life. What does that sound like? That sounds like racism, right?
Racism.
Yeah. And so where God's words, you know, it talks about Israel being a very specific nation and very special. The idea of Israel was that they would be sort of a vessel to bring his grace to everyone. And so there's a lot of conversation in Scripture about all nations, every nation. The goyim is the Hebrew word for nations. God has a love for all the people he's created. I mean, he created them, and he did a wonderful job at it, you know. So in the evolutionary concept, though, Darwin was writing, and I read the quotes a couple of weeks ago. Darwin was writing about how certain races are a little bit closer to the apes, and certain races are a little bit, you know, a little bit less close to the apes. Yeah. And you can see this in full fruition in Hitler. Hitler took on his ideas, some of Nietzsche's ideas, and really developed a culture-wide dark side to that, to the recognition of races. I still think that I don't believe in colorblindness, by the way. I don't believe in colorblindness. There was a popular concept that came out, I think, in the 90s, where we were trying to be colorblind, right? Blind to the races. I don't think that's actually helpful. I actually think that we should see the races as examples of God's incredible complexity in how he designs
So
things.
unique.
Yeah. So in other words, we shouldn't be shutting our eye to the races. We should be opening our eye to the races and looking at how God has made things beautifully, you know? That's how I see it. So, what's that?
Each one unique.
Yes, right. So yeah, he makes us unique. The race is unique on a macro level. Then you drive into those races and you see uniqueness in the micro level. You know, you see each person is individually different. You can go all the way to the fingerprints, all the way to the genetics. It's God creates things with such beauty and such complexity that I don't think we need to pretend like we're blind to it all. We just need to recognize that it's a good thing, you know.
And even the people he chose to be his people, he also corrected and needed a standard
Yeah.
and showed their faults.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say that the most honest history written is the Hebrew Bible, like the Old Testament. Because you read the other ones, the history is always written by the winner, right? It's always written by the people that succeed, and they're always going to give a glowing report for themselves. Except when you read the Old Testament scriptures, you see all the darkness. They are totally honest about themselves, because the hero of their story was not themselves. The hero of their story was God. Yeah. So anyway, so those are some of the things we've dealt with in the past last couple lessons on this. Last week we talked about, I guess, to me, one of the most powerful arguments for just the existence of God, period. Like, let alone how many days creation took, let alone how he created, all these other things. Just the raw argument for the existence of a God is the one that William Lane Craig, a theologian and an apologist, has really popularized. He didn't make this up. He just sort of more popularized it by just being in some major debates. He was in a debate with a guy named Christopher Hitchens, who is one of the premier atheists in the last several decades. I believe he's considered one of the four horsemen of atheism. I mean, that's how high a level he's at. I've watched several of the videos between William Lane Craig and Christopher Hitchens, and when they square off with their debates, William Lane Craig just offers this really simple, it's like a 2-sentence argument. And you'll see Christopher Hitchens go through all these things, all these gymnastics, all this accusation of God or the church or whatever else, but he can never address the question, does God exist? He can never answer that. The basic argument goes basically like this. And this is a great one to have in your tool shed if you ever need to be in this debate. William Lane Craig says, whatever comes into existence must have a cause. Now just think about that. If it came into existence, something must have caused it to come into existence. You can't really work your way around that one. We know the universe came into existence, therefore the universe must have a cause. Right. Yeah.
And I want to piggyback on that. There's some of the greatest minds in existence, down to Stephen Hawking and Einstein. And I'm reading a book right now called by a certain author whose name escapes me, but a very smart guy, a very great author. He dives into the mathematics and the design, just of the human being. Like if you were just to look at your fingertip in a microscopic level, like just the way that things are, down to just the atoms and the molecules. It's so, the smartest people are realizing that the margin for error is so minuscule that it can't just be coincidence anymore.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so that just screams creation and creator.
Right.
in
Yeah.
my opinion.
Yeah, agreed. Actually, that's the next thing I wanted to get into, so we can go into some of that. Now, it sounds like you are looking at some details that I haven't looked at, but the next argument is just a fine-tuning argument. That's what you've probably read that term a million times. Yeah, right.
Mathematicians have figured out probabilities of us being far enough from the Earth, or just these little, or just gravity being at a certain amount of gravity.
Right.
It just begs of design,
Right.
just a brilliant mind.
Right. I think it even goes down to like location of our solar system in the galaxy. If it were too close to the center, we'd be destroyed. If we were too far out, we'd float apart. Just all that kind of stuff.
So with humanity and scientists and archaeological digs and things, should we really be disturbed if we are progressing and looks differently than when we were first created? Should that be something?
Oh.
I mean, it's in God's hands, not ours.
Yeah.
So whether that's true or they can find it factual or whatever, so what?
Yeah.
It's still going to be God who
Yeah.
created, right?
And that's the kind of view that I was talking about. There's a close friend of mine who believes in sort of, the basic course, like what you'll read in textbook as far as evolution goes. But he just believes that God's behind it. God's doing the
Yeah,
work,
yeah.
So it'd be like an assisted
You
evolution, I
can't do
guess you
that
could
because I
say.
don't want him to do that, or I don't want to have to refer that to my ancestors or something, right? Is what you're saying is we shouldn't look at it as God wouldn't have done that because we look like this?
So I take the view that it's the Bible meant what it said when it said that it was a couple of days, 6 days.
Oh, yeah.
So
yeah,
that's my view.
Yeah.
But I'm just trying to say that the view that God was behind an evolutionary process rather than a 6-day creation.
Oh,
that
no,
view,
no, you can't change the word.
Yeah, right. That's exactly.
Yeah,
But I do accept that view as less dangerous than just a godless view.
Yeah.
That's just, to me, that's been absolutely dangerous in the world. So the fine-tuning argument, there's a couple of arguments that I just thought were really interesting. I'm going to read a couple of these out just so that you can get a sense of what these are like. Here's one. It comes from Cold Case Christianity. Forget the guy's name. J. Warner Wallace. He's a forensic scientist, and he was looking at the idea of creation and basically getting down to this question of can we see God's handiwork in creation? And so he wrote this book called Cold Case Christianity, which is harder to say than it might come across. But here's a couple of his comments. He says, the Earth's relationship to the sun is favorable to life. Okay, so the Earth orbits the sun with a tight, habitable zone that is highly statistically unlikely for a planet to be in. If Earth were slightly more distant from or slightly closer to the sun, a stable water cycle would be impossible. Also, small changes to the orbital tilt of our planet or minor variations to the tilt of Earth's axis would disallow our climate. the length of rotation matters as well. If Earth had a slower one, our days would be too hot and our nights would be too cold to support life. Shorter, and the wind speeds would also be too extreme. I'm just thinking about all those little details right there in terms of how we relate to the sun and our tilt away from or toward the sun. It's very, very specific, and if it weren't just like it is, then life would be impossible on this planet.
The fact that one of our closest planets is so massive that it draws asteroids towards it, like a
Yes.
vacuum away from us, is another amazing thing.
Yeah.
Like somebody who designed the solar system thought, I'm gonna put this here so that Earth can be
What is it?
Saturn, Neptune.
I think the moon does achieve that too.
The moon itself does
actually
reflect a lot.
changes the shape of the ocean.
Yeah,
That's
it-
right.
it affects the tides.
Yeah, between it,
Well,
the sun
even-
hitting it.
The ratio of the moon for a solar eclipse,
Mhm.
it's like an exact shape
Yeah.
for the distance.
Of the sun.
And it's just like in the universe, it's like that is like a unique thing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
So it's kind of strange. I mean, I've actually read like people will talk that like the moon was created by aliens because of like a lot of weird stuff. But
Right.
it's all that whole fact of people can't wrap their mind around there being
just to
another
clarify,
line, you know?
just to clarify, the
Simple
argument for that idea of the Earth is made by, or the moon was made by aliens, people are arguing for that because it's so specifically correctly sized and correctly positioned that it seems impossible for it to be accidental, right?
Plus it
The
takes
alien
away God.
involved is
Right.
the alien.
Right.
It's the alien. It's
Yeah,
the
right.
one. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? The one supernatural. Yeah, God.
Another one here, I'm just going to read another one of these examples. This one is about Earth's atmospheric conditions, which are also favorable to life. It says the surface gravity of Earth is crucial or critical to its ability to retain an atmosphere friendly to life. If Earth's gravity were stronger, our atmosphere would contain too much methane and ammonia. If our planet's gravity were weaker, Earth wouldn't be able to retain water. As it is, Earth's atmosphere has a finely calibrated ratio of oxygen and nitrogen, just enough carbon dioxide and adequate water vapor levels to promote advanced life, allow photosynthesis without an excessive greenhouse effect, and allow for sufficient rainfall. Just thinking about that again, you've got just our gravitational pull alone affects the quality and the balance of our air. That's crazy. That's very specific. And the way that they've talked about it, I remember when I was younger, the way they talked about the fine-tuning argument is that people would say, even I guess evolutionary scientists, they would say the specific location and the fine-tuning of our world is so perfected that it's hard to imagine any planets existing that have life on it. And then I remember for some reason, maybe 10 years ago or a little bit more than that, they just stopped talking about it that way. And now they just say planets with life are inevitable. Just complete opposite turn. And I don't know any of the science that they've used to turn that. They've just started talking about it as inevitable. Like there's a lot of planets probably out there. Probably in our solar system, there's some of them, that support life. Well, why?
Because they want to believe that.
Because they want to believe that.
But even if there are, it's God that created it.
Right.
But they
So
want to,
what everyone's not getting is God created science.
Right.
God created not only the galaxy, like what? If He can create the Earth in a week
Yeah.
and everything on it,
Yeah.
tell me He can't make everything else.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, come on.
We already
So
know He
maybe
made
there
other
are
worlds.
planets. Maybe He's got, maybe it's like for Him, it's a fishbowl. He's got
Yeah.
different kinds of fish and different kinds of solar systems. We don't know.
Yeah.
You know
Right.
what I mean? All we have to do is honor Him and try to abide in Him.
Right.
It gives them a cover story to explain the rapture.
right, exactly, to disapprove God too.
There are other arguments like this, and I don't think I want to get into all of them because I don't want to just sit here reading the whole time. But there are just there's argument after argument for the fine tuning of this world, and I think that it's after a while of reading these arguments, and you could just do a Google search if you want to, just look up fine tuning argument or fine tuning creation. And you'll just see article after article about how incredibly this planet has been created and designed. Let me just read this. This is the part I do want to read. This is Christopher Hitchens' response to the fine-tuning argument. And he's not responding to this particular author, but he was arguing with William Lane Craig and brought up this, I guess, retort to the fine-tuning argument. It says, there is so much death. Listen to his view of this, okay? There's so much death in the present and so much certainty that all the universe will dissipate that the designer must be at least very incompetent, if not evil. Therefore, it is unlikely that a designer exists. So all he can see is the death. All he can see is the fact that this universe is dissipating. So he says, yeah, maybe if one exists, must be evil. He says, why are there so many shooting stars, collapsed suns, and failed galaxies? We can see that with the aid of a telescope. Sometimes we can see with the naked eye the utter failure, the total destruction of gigantic, unimaginable sweeps of outer space. He's quite eloquent, by the way. I love how he speaks. Is this fine-tuning, or is it extremely random, capricious, cruel, mysterious, and even incompetent? And have you thought of the nothingness that is coming? There is a real question about ex nihilo. In other words, creation out of nothing. That's what ex nihilo means. But nihilo is coming to us. In other words, nothingness is coming to us. In the night sky, you can already see the Andromeda galaxy. It's heading straight for ours in a collision course. Now that's, by the way, several billion years or something on its course, right? I'm sorry, I probably shouldn't mention this, but there was a show. It was a comedy movie where there was a guy with like one of those cement rollers, and he's driving toward the other guy. And there's like this frightening scene. It looks like he's about to be squished, and he's like screaming and stuff. And then it pans back to the other guy. He's riding, and then it turns back. I don't remember. But they finally show like the wide sweep of them, and they're like way apart. The guy with the roller is like barely rolling. That's really what is going on here. So he says, is that part of a design? Was it fine-tuned to do that? That's talking about the Andromeda galaxy. He says, was it fine-tuned to do that? We know that the universe is expanding away from itself at a tremendous rate. It is thought that the rate would go down. No, the rate of expansion is increasing. Nothingness is certainly coming. Who designed that? This is not fine-tuning, ladies and gentlemen. And if this is the work of a designer, then there is an indictment to which that designer may have to be subjected.
If the Bible's true and the rapture's coming, I'm sure it'll happen before the Andromeda galaxy.
I'm pretty sure.
So
Right.
I'm the one worried about other galaxies.
Right.
But at the same time, there is evil in this world. What this author's hang up is he thinks God is creating the evil in the world. Well, that's not so.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to learn that lesson recently when I had a near fatal accident. It wasn't God wasn't the reason I almost died. He's the reason I lived. Okay? And so, but he gives us free choice. And oftentimes we choose and create
Yeah.
our who we hang out with, what our surroundings are, if this is a dangerous job, I'm gonna do it anyway or not. You know what I mean? Those types of things are decisions and choices that we make.
Yeah.
So God is not responsible. My good pastor Matt Messner from Faith Center in Eureka explained it to me this way. He said it's not, because I had questions. I was like, well, am I not abiding in him? Why did I have this event? And he's like, it wasn't him. It was the enemy. He said, you're the reason that you survived. He's the reason you live. You know what I mean? And so it's just God. There's evil in this world because people make the wrong choices, and we bring out that evil. That's shooting on TV all the time. Those are people doing evil things. That's not God.
It always brings me back to the Genesis statement where God is telling Adam, "You shall surely die." And sure enough, we've been dealing with that ever since.
Thank God for covenants, though,
Yeah, right.
and promises
Yeah.
we can rely on.
So,
Yeah.
do you think that maybe he should talk to some of these climate and alarmists? And maybe why would we, the climate's changing, it's going to be one thing.
Because
Yeah.
I don't think you'll find a climate alarmist that will listen to reasons
This guy's not speaking recently.
Right.
Oh, we're talking
Yeah.
about Hitchens, yeah.
If the nothingness is coming, why are we worried about it?
Right.
What about the climate?
Yeah.
Use more hairspray.
Yeah, right.
Use more hairspray. Yeah, Gene.
He's also anthropomorphizing just natural activities.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
By the fact that a star is created or dies, how is that either evil or
Right,
bad or good if you turn iron ore into a knife or a fork or a spoon, and you heat it up and change it into another substance, how is that good or bad
right,
in and of itself? I mean,
Right.
you can't say that God is evil because I made pork.
right.
Good-
Right.
Good point.
And at the same time, what he's arguing for has brought about incredible evil. I mean, we talked about Nazism and Nietzsche and stuff like that. Like,
That's what you do with
yeah,
what you have as opposed to
right.
the entities that you have, the trees, the rocks, the
Mhm.
formation of the planets.
But did the fork make you fat?
But as soon as Adam
Good
and
point.
Eve left the Garden of Eden, they were challenged to till the earth too. It was gonna be a broken,
Mhm.
they're gonna have to work hard at it. It wouldn't just produce because they were there conveniently. We're gonna have to work for it.
Yeah.
So it's a broken world.
Yeah, it's a broken world, and God has given us the choice to help bring light into it or not. And,
Yeah.
you know, so he can't be, the way I see it is he can't be held responsible for decisions that we make.
Right.
You know, like I had somebody coming up to me the other day, and they said, you know, they were talking about violence toward women. There was a girl talking about this, violence toward women, and how God must be evil if he has allowed this. And I said, wait, where does he allow this? Like, show me in all of his book where he has allowed this, you know. It doesn't talk about that. It doesn't allow that. He's designed men, and this was my argument with her at the time. He's designed men as protectors of women so that women cannot be worried, and yet there are men that choose to use that strength against women. That's not God's fault. That's the fault of those who
There's whole cultures
Go
that
against what
believe
he
one
said.
or less.
Yes, right.
In forgiveness and
Yeah,
mercy will forgive them.
yeah, but and then find repentance as well. You know,
Has to be done.
yeah. Another argument that Hitchens had that I just thought was interesting, and we talked a little bit about this last week, but he says, why did, and as another evidence of how God must be evil and how he must be careless, he said, why did God wait so long before he sent Christ? Human beings have existed for thousands of years on this planet before Christ's coming. Now, if you even take a creationist view of that, Jesus came in recorded history about 4,000 years in.
Christ was with
We're about 2,000 years afterward, right? So he came at the second third of history, you know, according to our, you know, recorded history. The second third, why didn't he care about all the people before those 2/3? Now, the first most obvious answer is they looked forward to Christ coming. We look back to Christ coming. It's still the same Jesus that came, you know. But the other argument is if you just look at actual population records and how the population has increased, we're looking at over the course of recorded history about, I think they said 108 billion people have lived on this earth. 2/3 of the time through history, when Jesus came, only about 10 billion lived before him. The population growth after that goes up about 10 times. In other words, what some people say is that Jesus came at the fullness of time, right? At just the right time, right before population growth expanded. And you know, so we have now 9/10 of the human population over time have had access to salvation. Gene,
Since the flood.
since
Since the flood.
Yeah.
Pre-flood, populations are only guessing.
yeah,
Right.
good point. Yeah, right.
And Jesus has always existed. He just is the name we give that part of God which came
Mhm.
in his form
Mhm.
to live among men as a son for a sacrifice, a
Yeah.
willing sacrifice.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So, I mean, if we're really going to believe the Bible, Christ was there from the beginning with
Mhm.
God.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it says the lamb was sacrificed from the foundation of the world,
Right.
right?
They say there's more people alive today than have ever lived.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right, that's right.
exponential growth.
Wait a minute, that's a little contrary. There's only 8 billion people on the planet today.
Meaning at any time, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, at any time in,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, no, I mean, it's like,
okay.
because if, I mean, it's like last 50 years, went
Yeah.
from like 4
Yeah.
million to
That's the J curve.
8 billion.
Mhm.
So, but anyway, but as far as the, if you look at that number based upon the sort of estimates, like there's more people alive today than have ever lived, like you add those numbers up. That's, I mean, that's actually how exponential growth works.
Hmm.
You know, if you stack a linear line
Mhm.
on top of itself, it never catches up to an exponential.
So what's the explanation of all the experts now saying that all the developed countries, US included, but we're not quite there yet, are in a decline?
Well,
Population decline. China, India.
well, that's birth.
Well,
It's
Kamala
birth-
is
birth
working
rates.
on that population.
That's
That's-
right. I should listen to Carmela.
Yes.
And I mean, that's been
Thanks,
a more
Elaine.
recent, that's been a more recent thing.
Yeah.
I mean, as far as worldwide, there have been some countries like Japan, I think, had begun to hit a decreasing or
Yeah, they are
low birth rate for a while, but I think it's been within the last 20 years really that the rest of the world has begun to slow down the birth rate.
Yeah,
They for
right.
many years had tax breaks for not having children, incentives for keeping the population down. And now they've got so many elders in their community that they're having to design robots for their healthcare. Because they simply don't have enough bodies to put in scrubs.
Mhm.
So, yeah, so there's a lot of scientific
China's
truths
also-
being spoken about.
Yeah.
But the main truth is that there is a God, and he does exist, and he is good.
Yeah,
So,
Our government puts out COVID so they get population.
it's,
I did.
Right.
everybody's got their own.
They're trying to take out all the old people.
Well,
But we're,
that's right.
And smokers, targeted
and
smokers.
you brought up at the beginning about all this gender stuff too, that's gonna reduce.
yeah, they want that social security.
Yeah, that's- That's an interesting one to me, because what you have there is a culture driving toward no
Failure to
birth
reproduce.
as much as possible.
Right.
Whether it's homosexuality, transgenderism, all these things produce no birth.
But I do think that's a pretty small population base. That's
Right.
exaggerated on how
It's
many
not
But-
so
but-
small anymore when, something like a third of the kids in school are.
gender confused.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it's increasing.
Yeah,
It's
Right.
gonna increase
Yeah.
as schools change people's
Yeah.
thinking and kids, and they grow up and there's another
Yeah,
generation.
they shouldn't be allowed to change our children's
Grow up, that
minds.
transgender people will.
Cartoons.
But what's frustrating is that there's a lot of conservative people still having lots of babies. I mean, I got 5 of them, you know, and there's other people like me, you
Our
know.
only hope is
And,
that
uh,
people homeschool like you guys
Yeah, but
are.
you're smart enough to keep them.
Well, that's what I'm
out.
saying.
That filth.
What happens is all of these people who are producing children, all their children are going into the school system and into the colleges, and they're being filtered right into this other way of thinking, which is just like, well, you take yours. You're hardly producing any. You take yours and damage them. You know, leave us ours, because you know we have pretty strong views of
It's like
the
Moses,
value of life and things like that.
it's
You
like
know?
Moses, just let us go out and worship our, you know,
Yeah.
let's go out in the desert away from you and
Yeah.
let's worship our God, you know? And it's like you can't apply.
They're training everybody for socialism.
What was that?
There was one commentator that brought that up, about conservative people, Christian, whatever, you know, most religious people with more morals, maybe not even totally Christian, but we were a foundational Christian
Mm-hmm.
country.
Mhm.
Said they're having children and they're gonna remove their children from the school, and he said if you wait long enough, that, because all the other ones who are this, you know, sick thinking and no children,
Mm-hmm.
he said in 20, 30 years, you will have, he said, some of the older people might not live long enough to see it all, but 20, 30 years, there's gonna be more Christians, more conservatives, more people who have good foundational beliefs.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he said.
That's very possible.
He said that's what's gonna happen, well, that's what he feels is gonna happen, nobody knows.
But in some countries, you do not even have schools that are taught in their areas, within their culture, so as soon as the family unit breaks down, that's where it's easier to live by people's rules instead of God's rules. I remember when I was a kid, you couldn't even live together without being married. Now you can have children and not be married, and you can divorce so easily. I think when culture breaks, when you first started talking, you were saying about that. Once culture breaks and we decide to make our own rules and we replace God, that's where the dangers come in, the changes.
Yeah.
Like Thomas Jefferson said, a lot of people chose or think they're choosing to be safe. And they lose the part that keeps them safe.
Yeah.
The liberty, the freedom.
So I wanted to give a couple of my, just some of my favorite arguments for a creationist view. And so one of my favorites came up, I don't remember how long ago this came up, but somebody just kind of said this in passing at a conference I was at, and it really got me thinking. I was just like, the thinking behind that is just so simple and yet so profound. Let me see if this is showing up. Yeah, okay. So what you have is this idea of what you might call gene heredity. I actually don't know if there's a more technical term for it, but this is one way of looking at it. Okay, so you take one dog and you want to breed that dog and to create a different line of dog, right? Yeah, we've got a couple of them in the room here. Okay, we've got a tall dog and a short dog, and that's exactly what I wanted to use. We got a tall dog and a short dog, right? So for many years, people thought that because of, I don't know if it's because of Darwin or if they just had this belief, but they believed that when you bred a dog or a horse or something like that, what you end up doing is you sort of, how do I say this? You're sort of creating a new look. You're creating new genetics. And over time they realized, oh, that's not happening at all. You don't have the creation of new genetics at all. What you have is when you have a couple of parent dogs, they have all the genetics that will be necessary for tall dogs and short dogs and black dogs and white dogs and striped dogs and spotted dogs and whatever else. So you have all these genetics. What you end up doing is you never add genetics. What you're doing is you're suppressing other genetics. You're suppressing certain genetics. So for instance, a tall dog will have short dog genetics suppressed. If you're breeding a short dog, you're having tall dogs genetics suppressed. Okay, so once you understand that basic principle, number one, from my knowledge, they have never observed anything else happening. That is how the genetics work. Okay, now you can eventually kill some genetics. Yeah, Gene.
But you have dominant and recessive
Yeah, right.
genetics that you deal with.
Right.
They're all there,
Mm-hmm.
but therefore you are specializing the dominant traits
Yeah.
that you want, or the recessive,
Right.
if you want a specific recessive.
In the case of dominant traits, though, they generally are retained in those genetics. It's just that those genes are suppressed. Where as opposed to the, I believe it's the recessive genetics, they can actually die out. So you can't bring it back in. But so once you understand that basic idea, what you realize is that the parent is the most complex animal, right? The parent is the most complex. You suppress to create more variety in their children, but the parent is the most complex version of that dog. So what you have, let's say again, you're trying to produce a larger one and a smaller one, right? You're going to have to reduce the large genetics to create the small one. You're going to have to suppress the tall genetics to create the small one. And so that parent species is going to be the most complex dog. That parent dog is going to be the most complex dog. Now go for a little bit further. Imagine you've got not only dogs but foxes and maybe, I don't know, like wolves or whatever. If you look for the parent species of those dogs, what you have is something that's even more complex than any one individual line of dogs. You have this dog that has all the genetics. Now just keep going backwards. We're going to just go backwards, okay?
Scientists and evolution thinks that they all came from wolves.
That's right. Yeah, I think that's very possible. I think
Changed from wolves.
right.
So what you're saying is the further back we go,
Yes.
ancestrally, the more pure the genetics. Therefore,
Right.
Adam and Eve were about as close to being.
Not just pure, not just pure. The point that I'm making is that the further back you go, the more complex the genetics are, okay? So if you go back to, sorry, go ahead.
Good.
If you go back to the parent species of, going back to this one, okay? You go back to the parent species of the wolf, the dog, and the fox, and the coyote, or whatever, then that parent species has more complex genetics than any individual line of those canine species.
More diverse.
More diverse, yeah. Going further back, I mean, we know that the evolutionary concept is that species were developed and split, right? So now you have to go to the parents of those splits. So let's say you've got, what do I have here? A bear, a raccoon. Some of this is a little bit fanciful because I don't.
And then a lion, is that a lion?
Do I have a lion in there? Yeah, that's right. I got a lion in there.
And a dog.
So,
Dogs.
so let's go to the
Bear
parents.
ate the lion.
So let's
Ate the other.
let's go to the parent species of all the quadrupeds. Okay, that animal that produced those subsequent lines of species has a lot of complexity built into its genes. Now, go even further back than that. We're not just talking quadrupeds, right? We're talking amphibians. We're talking about, lizards. We're talking about creeping things. Whatever parent species of those things must have had incredible complexity and just keeps getting more. In other words, that parent species had to have all of the genetic makeup and all of its coding in order to produce all the frogs, all the scorpions, all of the bears, all of the, you just name it, dogs, lions, whatever.
So you're saying a bear is gonna have the genetics of all those other species in the bear?
Okay.
In the
Yes.
parent bear?
In the parent bear.
Okay, but that's species specific though, because of DNA. Bear doesn't come from a snake,
No.
and
Right,
doesn't come
branches
from
off
a
from the same.
raccoon.
What I'm talking about is from the evolutionary concept. The parent species had to have the genetics for everything else.
Oh, you're saying the
If
evolutionists
your
say
point, if your point of view is that everything came from one end,
That's the evolutionary view.
Okay, you're saying
Yeah.
that's what they say, not that's.
Right.
Yeah, once you specialize, you
You're not-
can't go
You're
back.
not,
What I'm doing is I'm
changing
criticizing.
dark or something.
No, what I'm doing is I'm critiquing the evolutionary concept based on the actual genetic development.
So these is, let's say,
you lost us.
Okay, let me go back. Okay?
That's your point of view.
Okay, so what happens, what's happening is this, there's a lot of stopping and going. There's a lot of stopping and going, so let me just put this all out there, okay? So if you want to produce from one dog 3 different types of dogs, okay? This is just how genetics work. You have to, what you're gonna do is you're gonna suppress tall dog genetics to create a short dog. You're gonna suppress short dog genetics to create a tall dog. Same things works for brindled dogs and spotted dogs. You're suppressing some genetics in order to create other genetics or to allow other genetics to show up, okay? That's what we know in the scientific thinking. We know that just by observation, okay? So from this point on, I'm criticizing the evolutionary concept, okay? We know that there is probably a parent species, something like a wolf, that had all the genetics for all the dogs, right? We know that that's probably what ended up on the ark. But what kind of a creature not only produced the wolf, what kind of a creature produced the wolf, the bear, the raccoon, the lion? If you take all quadrupeds,
Nothing.
what's that?
Nothing.
Right, so, but again, I'm talking about, hold up. I'm talking about the evolutionary concept, okay? The evolutionary concept is that there was a parent species. So what does that parent species look like? What are its genetics like? It must have incredibly complex genetics in order to produce the lion, the bear, the chipmunk, the whatever. That parent species over all quadrupeds had to have a more complex genetic, right, in order to produce everything after that. Its genes have to contain all of the genetics for everything after it, okay? Now, going a little bit further back, again, this is a critique of the evolutionary concept, okay? So going further back, you have some parent species that also contain the genetics for all of the creeping things. You have some parent species that had all the genetics for lizards, snakes, quadrupeds, horses, bears, just you name it. All the things have to be in that complex item, complex creature. And then you go even further back, think about how at some point not only all amphibians, lizards, quadrupeds, all land-dwelling animals, but now you have all sea-dwelling animals and all birds. If everything came from one life source, whatever that life source creature was, its genetics had to contain everything following it, right?
And what split it up to change it?
Why not go back to Genesis on the days of creation where he says, and you shall read according to your kind?
That's my argument.
I was gonna
So
say,
again,
sorry.
I'm critiquing evolution. I'm not presenting a concept, okay? I'm critiquing evolution.
You're trying,
So now,
right now you're presenting.
right. So the last creature, this organism that sort of flopped out of the ooze and was electrified by probably electricity of some kind, it would have had to have all the genetics for every single living form that follows it.
Doesn't make any sense.
Doesn't make any sense.
Not under their theory.
Right.
Because you're allowed changes.
Like,
Right.
you lost me at algae. 'Cause I remember that in school, but I didn't really pay attention.
Mhm.
But I remember when the Mr. was like algae, right? Like, I'm like, yeah, right, something didn't come from algae. It's just like all of a sudden we're different
Right.
people, you know?
Right.
It doesn't, it's so ridiculous, I can't believe they actually.
So we never observe science that contrasts with the process I'm talking about. We've never seen science develop a new species. So once we're talking about the development of new species, we're in faith territory, not science territory. We're in a belief system, not a science system, because we're not observing the development of new species.
Although science is doing chimeras.
Right. Yeah, but that's combining.
You know what's kind of
Yes.
scary?
Right.
Yes.
It's like if you were like that person, you
Mhm.
did all these things, I mean, can you imagine how scary that would be? I mean, you would think to yourself, I mean, if you're a little bit like anxious person, like all these little chemicals could just change and then there goes Earth. Or you could possibly be thinking like that the evolution's still coming and that eventually we're gonna turn into like an elephant or something. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
An
Like,
AI.
I mean, like, does that evolution couldn't possibly just stop? Oh, got the perfect thing.
Well,
Human.
science-
Right.
science
Stop right
kind of-
here. I mean, no, it'd be a continuous.
Right. We should be in a continuum to something else. And actually, there are people that believe
Like an alien?
the aliens are the
Yeah,
next
I think
step.
that was next.
Now think about it. Okay, you've got like sloping foreheads, big jaws, right? Right.
Yeah.
At some point in history, the aliens all have like wide
They
foreheads
have
and tiny
ears,
jaws,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So and they're for some reason we were smaller and then we got taller and then we're going to get smaller for some reason. I don't know.
Sooner or
But-
later, the population is gonna wise up and ask, where are any of the fossils of any of these tweener species?
Right.
I
No,
mean,
they,
because they say that the dinosaurs came from a bird, or a bird
Yeah.
came from a dinosaur, one of the two. You don't have any in between.
not
There's no
Yeah.
transitional.
Yeah, I don't see
Right.
the evolution
Transitional
between
aspect.
the ape turned into man.
yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
They
Now-
show an ape.
It's
and then they show
pictures,
an
they don't have any
Right.
fossils.
Now,
Yeah.
not only should there be some of those species, those transitional species, there should be predominantly those species with a couple of what we would consider straight normal species. We should see entire layers of transitional species, and we don't see that. So why we don't see that, there's no explanation yet. But do you see my point? This original creature, whatever it was, in their view, this original creature would have had to have all the genetics for everything that existed, because we know that genetics don't develop, they suppress
Yeah.
to create new
Which
new
really would
looks.
have been a miracle that, some mud getting struck by lightning.
Oh, yeah.
Not just had genes, but
Right.
lots of genes.
Yeah.
The miracle
Now,
would have been.
lots of genes. Now, what's funny about this, I think the funniest term in all of evolution is the term simple cell, because that's what they call this. They call this a simple celled organism that sort of flopped out of the primordial ooze and got electrocuted by lightning somehow. I mean, I love even the photos. They'll have like distant volcanoes running into the lakes, the rivers, and you'll see like this little amoeba kind of popping out of the water. You're telling me that these things are superheated by lava and that thing is surviving? How is this happening? Now this actually goes,
Are they really still teaching?
Maybe God's
Yes.
a simple
Yeah.
self.
The miracle
They should put this
is
on the
that
screen and just
each
title
one
it
of those species
poppycock.
had a male and female.
one second.
I said the miracle is each one of those species had a male and a female evolve at exactly the same time.
That's right. Yeah. How did they have males and females? Yeah, that's a good question. The other one
They
that,
always came in pairs.
yeah, somehow. The other one that cracks me up is, okay, so another reversal. Okay, so again, using the basic science that we can see today, we can observe this. And I'm critiquing the evolutionary concept, okay? If you take the size of the sun right now, we know that it's burning a certain amount of tonnage of fuel. We know that it's burning off a certain amount of tonnage of fuel every day, okay? Tons, and like billions or something of tons. I don't remember the numbers. But so we know that the sun would be at some point larger than it is now, right? If we go back in time, it's increasing as you go back in time. If you go back, whatever it is, I think it's 11 billion years. I can't remember the latest numbers on how long evolution has taken. But
14.5 billion, I think.
yeah, okay, 14.5 billion. If you go back to the period of time, if you just do a reversal, okay, go back to the period of time in which there would have been sea life, basically the sun should have been touching the surface of the earth at that point in time. And you tell
Yeah,
me,
I heard that.
how is sea life going to be developing and surviving, Now, another view is that we cycled from somewhere else and ended up cycling the sun, coming into its orbit. But so again, how does life develop away from the sun? Or did we always sort of cycle into this perfect position for life to develop and just remain there, and we're sort of tightening in on the sun as the sun reduces in size, and we're just staying in this perfect place of fine-tuned existence? It just doesn't make sense. Yeah, something made it happen. Yeah. To me, that the idea is, if you're trying to defend the idea of evolution, it becomes just so ridiculous. The things, the hoops you have to jump through. It becomes ridiculous. The other favorite argument that I have, is this still up? No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
It's cartoons.
Oh, I know.
Actually, that's really interesting.
Oh, did it? I don't know if it'll.
I don't know, but it's a really good definition.
I don't know how you're gonna tie this
They're
into this-
G-rated.
into
They're
this
G-rated,
speech,
you're
but-
right.
Fancy to be exact, think it over how it looks, so,
Let's see. I think it.
yeah.
For some reason, it's not.
So most all those people start in the second chapter of Genesis and they use the Bible at all?
They don't use the Bible, I don't think.
But when you're talking about people that agree with evolution but want to believe in a God,
Right,
yeah,
They have to take away the concept of God
yeah.
in the Word.
Or cast out the 6 day creation.
Well, I'll just relate this last one. All right, guys. Okay, yeah. Hey, guys, let's make it one conversation. Can we do that? Can we make it one conversation? Okay. Okay. Back on here.
My question is,
Yeah.
these people that are promoting evolution, do they agree that genetics is by reduction, like?
Suppressed?
Well, this is my point. Whether they do or not, okay, I would say that if they're scientific observers, all they can say is that we observe one process of genetic suppression in order to create species. That's how it works, okay?
They would have to know that.
They would have to know that if they're geneticists, right? So that's the name of their field. They should know genetics. If they know that,
Yeah.
then the only